Did a child direct I Know What You Did Last Summer's most famous moment? It depends on who you ask. The new I Know What You Did Last Summer hits theaters this weekend, so here are some things I bet you never knew about the 1997 original. The story behind I Know What You Did Last Summer starts in the early 1970s, when author Lois Duncan overheard her teenage daughter talking to a friend on the phone. The girls were chatting about the boys that they were interested in, and slowly came to realize that they were both pursuing the same boy. This gave Duncan an idea about a teenage boy who was manipulating two friends. A little bit later, she read a story about a hit and run in the newspaper, and so she decided to combine these two ideas. The result was her 1973 YA novel, I Know What You Did Last Summer. The book, it should be noted, was a thriller about four teens trying to cover up a deadly accident, but it was not a slasher, and the characters were not being picked off one by a killer. Alright, flash forward to the mid-1990s. Indie producer Eric Feig is looking to make a name for himself in Hollywood, and he thinks Lois Duncan's novel would be the perfect big screen adaptation. So he successfully pitches it to the relatively new production company Mandalay Entertainment, but he sees it as more of a horror movie than a thriller. So he hires Kevin Williamson to write the screenplay. Williamson had just written and sold a script called Scary Movie that would later become Scream. And while that screenplay was a self-aware meta-commentary on slashers, Feig encouraged Williamson to write I Know What You Did Last Summer as a straightforward slasher, throwing back to the genre's 1980s classics. Williamson's dad was a commercial fisherman, so he changed the book's setting to a small fishing village, and he created the hook-wielding fisherman killer, which was also partially based on the Hookman urban legend, which dated back to the 1950s. So Williamson finishes the draft, but Mandalay and Feig need a big studio partner, and the top dogs weren't exactly knocking down their door. But then, Kevin Williamson's other horror script, Scream, becomes a big hit in 1996, and suddenly the teen slasher genre is alive and kicking, and everyone in Hollywood wants the next big horror movie in that vein. And so Sony's Columbia Pictures, who had previously rejected I Know What You Did Last Summer, snap it up and immediately fast-track it for theaters. The studio wanted to move quickly after the success of Scream, so the film goes into production in early 1997. By the way, Williamson took two unused scenes originally written for I Know What You Did Last Summer, and he actually used them in Scream 2, the car fight and the stair chase. Williamson suggested Jim Gillespie as director, and Gillespie got the job. Gillespie was not familiar with the original novel, but he found that 2/3 of the young women who were auditioning had read the book. For the cast, the producers wanted actors who were beautiful but likable. Party of Five star Jennifer Love Hewitt was first considered for Helen, but was then cast as Julie based on her ability to project vulnerability. Melissa Joan Hart was offered a role in the film, but turned it down because she thought the script was a Scream ripoff. The role of Barry was written as a bulky 6'2" quarterback, but Ryan Phillippe won the part despite not fitting the description. And Freddie Prinze Jr. landed Ray because Gillespie liked his everyman quality. Sarah Michelle Gellar was then the last lead to be cast in the film, and Gillespie said in a DVD featurette, "I wanted an actress that had a warmth to her, but could still come off as being a bitch." And for Missy, Gillespie needed an actress who could really make an impression with just two scenes, so he cast Anne Heche. The studio set the budget at $17 million and gave the movie an October 1997 release date. They started shooting on March 31st, 1997, less than 7 months ahead of that planned release date. They'd have just 10 weeks total to shoot the film, 7 of which were night shoots, which was really hard on the cast and crew. Gillespie and cinematographer Dennis Crossan designed a color scheme of heavy blues devoid of bright colors. For the movie's opening, they shot on coastal roads in Sonoma County, California. The car crash, for example, was filmed at Culmer Gulch, just north of Jenner, California, on Highway 1. And then the rest of the film was shot in Southport, North Carolina, where the movie's story also takes place. The beauty pageant was filmed in the Amuzu Theater. They shot at the Old Yacht Basin and the Southport Fish Company. Julie's house is on Short Street, north of Southport Marina. Duke University stood in for the exteriors of Julie's Boston College. The hospital sequence was shot in an unused wing of Dosher Memorial Hospital. And Gillespie was so impressed by Shiver's department store that he reworked parts of the script to include it as a location. In 2018, Jennifer Love Hewitt revealed to Us Weekly that her big "what are you waiting for" moment was conceived of and directed by a child who won a contest to come on and create a moment for the movie. That moment was so iconic, it was even parodied in Scary Movie. But Gillespie told Vulture in May 2025 that the actress's story is bullshit and it never happened. He says there was no child pinch directing on set, and the famous line was in the script. He even sent Vulture the pages to prove it. Hewitt did not respond to Vulture's request for comment, so who knows what's going on there. The movie wrapped in late spring, early summer 1997, but they did have to do some reshoots. Gillespie originally didn't want the movie to be very bloody, but Elsa's death scene wasn't making sense in the edit without blood, so they went back and reshot it with a blood splatter effect. After a test screening, they realized they needed one death early in the film to create a sense of danger for the characters, so they created the scene where Max is killed at the crab factory. The movie's original ending had Julie getting an email that read, "I still know," but that wasn't dramatic enough, so they redid it with the same message written on a shower shower stall. And they filmed it on a soundstage next door to where Jennifer Love Hewitt was shooting Party of Five. Over the summer of 1997, Columbia started marketing the movie as being from the creator of Scream, referring to writer Kevin Williamson, who also wrote Scream. But Miramax, who owned Scream, was not happy about that, and so it sued Columbia, arguing that the claim was misleading as it implied that Wes Craven, the director of Scream, was involved in I Know What You Did Last Summer. Kevin Williamson, for what it's worth, was also not happy about the slogan, and he asked Columbia to remove it from the marketing. A week after the movie came out, a federal judge ruled in Miramax's favor and made Columbia remove it from the promo materials. I Know What You Did Last Summer opened on 2,524 screens in North America on October 17, 1997. It did $16 million opening weekend, landing at number 1, where it stayed for 3 weeks. It would go on to gross $125 million total worldwide, more than 7 times its budget. It was nominated for 6 Blockbuster Entertainment Awards, winning 3, but critics were not kind to the movie. Today, 45% of the 115 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive. The critics' consensus reads, a by-the-numbers slasher that arrived a decade too late. The mostly tedious I Know What You Did Last Summer will likely only hook die-hard fans of the genre. And its biggest critic was original author Lois Duncan. In 2002, Duncan said she was appalled that her book became a slasher movie because her own daughter Kate was murdered in 1989 at the age of 18. Duncan was quoted as saying, "As the mother of a murdered child, I don't find violent death something to squeal and giggle about." But there's no denying that the movie was successful and was a big part of the slasher resurgence of the late 1990s. Williamson's 2 films would be parodied by Scary Movie, The Simpsons, Popular, Dawson's Creek, and Boy Meets World. The latter even featured Jennifer Love Hewitt in their slasher send-up, And Then There Was Sean. The movie also launched Eric Feig's career. After Summer, he'd go on to produce Slackers and the Step Up series. He then brought the book Twilight to Summit Entertainment, but it only had sold 4,000 copies, which eventually led to him becoming the co-president of Lionsgate. As for I Know What You Did Last Summer, it became a franchise unto itself. It got a theatrical sequel a year later in 1998, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. Hewitt and Prince Jr. returned, and it made $84 million against a $24 million budget. There was an official Indian remake in 2003. In 2006, Mandalay and Sony made a direct-to-video follow-up called I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer. In 2021, we got a TV reboot on Amazon, which lasted just 1 season. And meanwhile, Sony has been planning a theatrical reboot since at least 2014. Mike Flanagan was on board to write the script at one point, but he dropped out. And then in 2023, Sony finally announced the Legacy sequel, once again titled I Know What You Did Last Summer. It would be heading to theaters July 18th, 2025, written by Sam Lansky and Jennifer Caton Robinson, directed by Robinson. Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. returned, along with new cast members Madeline Klein, Chase Suey Wonders, and Jonah Hauer King. If you've made it to the end of this video, drop a "What are you waiting for" in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. For more entertainment news and deep dives, subscribe to my newsletter.